And so I could never, it meant that my body would fight that element, that drug, to my death, because it was so opposed to it being in my body. So they were like, okay, come off of this one. But we have this one over here.
Have you been diagnosed with MS and you're searching outside our typical medical system for more answers? You're definitely not alone. Multiple sclerosis can actually be healed holistically. And by the way, I'm Adrienne Charlie, and I became interested in holistic health because of how I reversed my own diagnosis. And I became a nutritionist and a certified MS integrative health coach so I can help others do the same thing. And guess what? I'm working on something really exciting right now. I am launching at the end of April a reverse multiple sclerosis community. I'm going to have a free version, and I'm going to have a version where you're going to get a lot of extras for just $9 a month. That's it, $9 a month. Most people can't buy lunch for under $9. So here's what you're going to get. The people that want the free version are still going to get a lot of benefits. They're going to get a beginner course that they're going to go through to start their healing journey. And then they're going to get one health group coaching session with me once per month. And you're going to get access to a wealth of information from your fellow members. Now, the paid version is going to get all that. Plus, they're going to get an extra 3 group coaching sessions with me. So that's 4 per month, and they're an hour long. You're also going to get my 12-week Nourish and Reverse MS Signature course. And I had my past clients go through this with coaching from me for just under $900. This is going to be part of the Holy Grail in helping you heal. I'm also going to have a monthly group speaker to help you reverse your diagnosis. I'm going to have a healing recipe library where I'm going to have a ton of recipes and I'm going to keep adding to it. So these are going to be delicious resources that you can go to when you can't figure out what to make for breakfast, lunch, or dinner. And you're also going to get exclusive resources and special access to tools and downloads. It's going to be amazing, and I can't wait for you to join it to become a founding member. Now, in the future, the $9 per month might go up, but guess what? If you stay a member, you will always have that $9 per month price. It will not go up. Even if other people new coming in, let's say 6 months from now, might have to pay a little bit more, but you're going to still pay that $9 a month. So I'm excited to have this community with you. So to join, just go to my website page, nourishyourway.com, and then on the front page, you'll see a button that says join the community. Just click it and get on my list to be the first to know about the launch. You could be the first member in. So get on the list, and then I'll see you in the membership. Hi, everybody. Welcome back to the podcast. And I want to introduce my friend Megan from Washington.
Hello. Thank you for having me on.
Yeah, I'm excited to hear your story, and I know you had quite a journey. So I want my listeners to hear what you went through, and then we're going to find out how you healed yourself, right?
Yep.
Because you reversed your MS. Is that correct?
Well, yes, I say I no longer identify as having MS.
Same here, Megan. So, okay, how did it start for you? Like, how old were you? What year was it?
So we go back to 2007. I was 37 years old. I had 3 children, ages 5, 7, and 9. I was incredibly active, running 6 to 8 miles, 6 to 7 days a week. I did strength training. I was a mom who could do it all and did it all. And in, as I said, 2007, I was diagnosed, just started with some tingling in my feet. Then I was peeing my pants on a playground. And so I went to see a gynecologist because I thought I had a tumor. And I was very fortunate. I live in a place where MS is not an anomaly. It's very common. And so I was diagnosed very quickly. From start to finish, it was just a couple of months. And unfortunately, I progressed very rapidly. And within a year, I went from running 6 to 8 miles a day to using a cane or an arm crutch to navigate anywhere outside of my home. I also became an avid wall walker. I remember looking at the walls and just seeing smears of handprints up and down the wall because that's how I navigated throughout the house. And so I'm trying to just stay distinct and not go too far off of my path. I immediately turned to pharmaceuticals because that is what my family's path was. I grew up in New Haven, Connecticut, Yale University. That is what we do. We go to doctors. And as I explained to Adrienne, I jumped on the pharmaceutical bandwagon wholeheartedly. My parents' next door neighbors was the former CFO of a huge pharmaceutical company that was coming out with a new drug. I mean, everybody bombarded me with, this is the way to go. And so I did. And for 10 years, and that's what I did. I became a diligent patient, and I tried the disease modifying drugs or therapies, started with Avenex, shot myself in the thigh, once a week, and required at least a bottle of wine to get the chutzpah to do that. I'd put my kids in front of the movie. I'd grab my bottle. Again, my ex was never anywhere. And I would say, Mommy's going to do her medicine. And I'd have my bottle of wine and I'd take my, shot, and I would go up, and it would take almost the whole bottle for me, because it's not natural to stab yourself.
No, Megan, I would do the same thing. I think like that. I would hate that. My God.
Yeah. And I did not respond well. 4 hours later, I would be on the bathroom floor, vomiting, night sweats. I would spend the night in the bathroom, get up at 6 a.m., get my kids up, take them to school, and go to the gym and sweat out the toxins.
Oh,
did that.
Okay, so
that was just my mentality. I hated how it made me feel. And I was so physically active, and I didn't give that up when I was diagnosed, contrary to a doctor telling me that I should not exercise because raising my body temperature would be very bad. I was like, I'm going to still do this just because.
So were those the side effects that you were talking about?
I don't know what caused it. It was my body saying, I don't like this drug. But if you looked at the list of possible side effects, they were all there. And instead of being alarmed, I felt soothed. Oh, that's okay. This is supposed to happen. Like, not reading it as my body is like, hey, Megan, this is no bueno. And so I did that for a year without really complaining, and got back to my doctor's office. At this point, a little side segue into my story is I ended up buying a Segway, an actual Paul Blart Segway, because I had horrible drop foot. So that would cause me, but I still could stand, and I didn't want to get apologies to everyone who uses them, but I call them geriatric scooters, but my kids were too young. And so the Segway ended up working fantastic. And so I used that for many, many years to get around. So I used a Segway. So I returned to my doctor after the year of being on Avenex, pulled up on my Segway, and she ended up riding it. The nurses rode it. That was the great thing about the Segway. Everybody wanted to try it. So I had a little cane, and I'd get off of it, and I would let people ride it. But the test they do with walk down the hallway and we time you, so that's a big, big thing in my neurology department where I went, was each time you went, they would have you walk down the wall and time you to see how long it took you to get a certain distance. And that was their assessment of your mobility level. And then there's a scale that they look at.
Interesting. Yeah. I haven't heard of that.
Yeah. Oh, well, I did it all over Seattle. And in my book, I write about how the very first time they had me do it, it was in one of those hospital gowns. And I'm like, I already stumbled like a drunk person. Why do they have me walking down this grungy hallway, bearing my ass like a teeter-totter, waiting for me to fall? Like, it was the most depressing thing. I was thinking this is going to be like big things, neurology, but no, I'm stumbling down a hallway. So
that doesn't seem right at all.
No, but that is what they do. I don't know what the assessment is called or why they do it, but it had significantly, I had regressed or progressed or whatever you want to call it, and was bouncing off the walls, and I did a horrible job. So my doctor was like, we've got to get you on another drug. So then I went on Tysabri, and my second infusion, I had hives. And so my third infusion, they pre-medicated me with Benadryl and hydrocortisone or something. And 4 minutes into the infusion, I went into anaphylactic shock and vomited all over myself.
Oh God,
Later,
Megan.
my doctor called me into her office to discuss possibly staying on the medication, but they would just pre-medicate me each time with a hospital admission.
That doesn't make sense.
No.
Oh my God.
But fortunately for me, they did a test which tested, and I was antibody positivity. I had developed antibody positivity to Tecfidera or whatever, Tysabri. And so I could never, it meant that my body would fight that element, that drug, to my death, because it was so opposed to it being in my body. So they were like, okay, come off of this one, but we have this one over here. And so I went on another, and all through, my father's sending me emails with articles about promising, and I'm just believing that I'm doing the right thing, never stopping to think about it. And I'm getting worse and worse. And every single thing, I'm adding bottles of wine to it, because alcohol became a self-medicating thing, because pain became a part of my life, and it just got worse and worse.
Oh
and so my
God.
last,
And not really realizing that all these side effects was your body saying, hey, I don't like this. I'm going to give you a symptom, right?
Yeah. So the last straw was Tecfidera. And so it was the first oral. I had not been, I came off of, I'm giving myself less credit than I should. I did say, whoa, maybe this isn't working. And so when I had that reaction to Tysabri, I did 1 round of rituximab, which at that point was not approved for MS, but my doctor wrote a compassionate care waiver letter to the insurance company saying this woman is going to be in a wheelchair within 3 years if she doesn't get serious help, because again, I'm progressing worse and worse. But maybe it's because my body is so sick of the toxins I'm putting in it, but I don't know. I will never, ever know.
Right.
But
Because you trusted the Western medical
doing
system.
all of the things that the doctor tells me to do. And, and so I didn't take anything for the rituximab did seem to give me a little bit of reprieve, but the insurance company wouldn't pay for it more than just that once. And so then I just said, I'm going to hang out, and all the hype again. I was a blogger, and I was known as BBH with MS. And I was constantly getting invited to do interviews on other people's blogs and write things about, these new drugs that were coming up, and we were going to have an oral option so that we didn't have to do the infusions. And that was huge. And so I figured I would just wait around for that. And in that time, my life began to change. I got a divorce. I bought my own house. I returned to work. So those are maybe negative things, because that was more stress. But I also did online dating, and I met the man who I've now been with for 15 years, who we very, very quickly knew that we were a thing, and that this was a match. Like I have not totally delved into the world of spirituality in regards to my healing. I know it's a necessary thing. And so I try to recognize things that I think are, maybe that magical thing. And he and I aligning when we did is definitely one of those moments. I don't think I could have found somebody more appropriate. But all of that said, I was still spiraling. By 2015, when the new medication had come out, I had actually lost my job at the app store, which was a blessing. Everybody else in the room, they locked us in the room for like 20 minutes while they shut down all of our emails. And then we were bought out by a company in India. And all of the people who had started this company were in the room, and this was their life. And so they were crying. They were so devastated. I hated my job. I hated every person I worked with. When this opportunity came up that I got 18 months severance with healthcare, I was in. Yeah. And as I said, I did go to a headhunter. And at that point I had been blogging and was winning awards, and he started reading it, and he apparently used to be a journalist. And he's like, listen, I got to tell you, this is what you should be doing. And I've always known I'm a writer. As I said, I wrote a book. Like I have always written. I just never had something to write about. And that was one of the great things that MS gave me, was an opportunity to share with the world, like, my humor and how I deal with life, because this isn't an anomaly for me. I have had many bad, tragic things happen to me: house fire, hit by a car when I'm pregnant, teenage pregnancy. I mean, a lot of things. And so I'm a happy person. So this was an opportunity for me to share that with the world. And so I delved into the world of writing, lost my job. I was now at home. I was gaining weight. I was becoming more and more immobile. So even though I was writing more, it wasn't getting me anywhere. And I went on to Tech Federa. And when I did, their reps contacted me because they had read my blog and they were like, ding, ding, ding. Hi, would you like to be a speaker? And so they started flying me places and paying me. It was the first time I monetized being sick. I got to tell you, it was really attractive. But unfortunately, from the day I started taking their drug, I did not have a bowel movement for 33 days.
Oh my goodness.
Yeah. So I'm calling the doctor like week 1. I'm like, hey, this constipation thing, it's getting a little alarming. And he's like, let me look at the brochure. Constipation isn't listed. It's got to be something else in your life. Look at your diet. Maybe you need more exercise. I'm like, dude, nothing changed but me taking this pill. So 33 days of me calling. I ended up stopping the blog and Instagrammed a lot of things. So all of this is on Instagram, but I did everything from wrapping my belly in saran wrap. I don't even know what that was about. If I had used castor oil, that might make sense, but I was just doing anything. Google, make myself poop. 33 days is so alarming and it's so mind-boggling. Meanwhile, I am scheduled to fly to Montana to give a speech about this wonderful drug, and it's a $1,200 check. And my wonderful, amazing, at that point, still boyfriend, who isn't supporting me, but I'm living with him, and I want to make money, so I want to go. And so I call the rep and I'm like, listen, I think I need to come off of it for just a little bit, but I'm happy to go and talk to people. And they're like, no, you have to be on it, in order to. And so I ended up, I'm going to go out in the world and say this. I lied. I said I was on it and I wasn't. And I went to Montana and I told these people. But in the meantime, I had come off of it because I was having these problems. But the freaking allure of that money. And again, This is all just the cycle of how I became a sick person and a patient rather than somebody whose body was at dis-ease that needed to just course correct. My course correction was so massive. I mean, it started with getting a divorce and it went through so many different parts of my journey to get me where I am, to understand that, again, it's not incurable. It's healable. It's not as if it's a life end sentence, but it is certainly a moment where you have to do some serious self-assessment and decide, is this what we want to do? So Tech Federa was off, and I just decided the pain at that point, as you can imagine. I mean, there's just so much inflammation, and long after that, I was having a conversation with my naturopath, and I was like, can I ask you something? And he's like, what? And I was like, when I finally pooped, it wasn't a lot. It wasn't my husband was like, oh my God, we're going to have to buy a bigger toilet. And it wasn't this great grand thing. And so I was like, and there never was. And so I was like, I said to my doctor, I'm like, where did it go? And he's like, do you want me to tell you? And I was like, I do. And he's like, your body absorbed it. And I was like, again, that's another level of toxicity that I have had to battle and deal with. I had 10 years of let's do pharma, and then I had gut issues for almost 6 years.
So not only were you sick with MS, the drugs made you sicker and they caused other problems.
Many, many, many more. I spent more time. I know. I spent more time trying to correct the long-term ramifications of being on the pharmaceuticals. I mean, we're talking about my gut. We haven't even explored my mind. All of the things I was putting in my body to fight this disease that I wasn't, nothing was firing and nothing was working. And all I was telling myself was, it's the disease. The disease is getting to my brain. And so when I started weed, I certainly didn't think this was going to help my brain at all.
When was it that you decided that using cannabis might be a better option?
So in 2016, after the Tech Federa incident, the pain was so bad. I had been on methadone that was doing nothing. And so they were discussing putting a pain pump in my hip. And
Okay.
so that was going to be, they decided that I had moved to secondary progressive and that a pain pump, a baclofen in my hip would be the route to go. And that, again, just sent alarms. That's implanting something permanent in my body. And even though I hadn't been listening, I was beginning to listen. And I just thought that's not the route. And throughout this, with the pain part of it, I broke down one night in just absolute misery because I told my husband I was an alcoholic. And he had the wherewithal to look at me and say, no, you have a pain problem. And that was when we started talking about using cannabis. And I had talked to my doctor and I had my medical marijuana card. I had had it for like 4 years. It's legal here, but no one had told me anything about it or that it was helpful. And so when I came off of the pharmaceuticals, I just made a decision. If I'm going to go with something else, I need to get all of the other stuff gone. I can't just add one more thing. My body is about to explode. And so I came off and stayed off everything for about 4 months. And it was agony, but it was no worse than I was on the pharma. And so I knew nothing about cannabis other than my brother was a stoner and he was mean. And so I thought cannabis makes people mean. Like that literally was I smoked a little bit when I was younger in college. I had a paranoia attack, thought, I really like alcohol. I'm going to stick with that. So I had stayed away from it. And so each visit to the dispensary was so painful because I was convinced that they were going to mess with me and get me stoned. And I was so fearful. I was so where so many people are. And I would go home and I wouldn't consume it for like a week because we have 5 kids between the two of us. And our way of expressing love is we make fun of each other. And if I got stoned off my butt, they were going to make fun of me forever. Like there were all of these things that made me think, but in my mind, there was nowhere else to go. Like I write in the chapter that I wrote in the book that you listened to, I never thought about suicide because I have 3 children and I understand what that would do to them. But I had months of not wanting to do tomorrows. And so like I had to do something, and cannabis seemed like the only option. And somewhere in my mind, it clicked. As I said, there are many people who use cannabis for symptoms, and I applaud that. And I think it is a fantastic replacement of, end of the day, have a drink, pain, ibuprofen. Like can't sleep, instead of Zoloft, take CBD. I make an oil that even my mother takes nightly, and she cannot go to sleep without it. So, I mean, it helps people. And so I slowly trotted through, and each step of the way, you said you must use CBD because you are way too hyper. Again, I am not making fun of you. I'm using that as a learning experience because I too have that opinion, and I am unique. I lack an enzyme that uses the THC, so I don't get high. It does other things to me, and it puts my focus on myself and getting myself healthy. But I have never experienced feeling stoned other than, as I said, when I was in college and things. And so that is certainly, a benefit I have because I've been on all of these podcasts where other people are consuming and they eventually become stupid. And I am just like the brilliant person. Like I walk out and I say to my husband, I'm like, well, that went terribly. And he's like, no, honey, you did really well. The other people, not so much. As I also explained to you, I don't want people to be afraid of the high, but to embrace it. As I said, I now understand that my high is instead of just zoning out on the TV, I become obsessed with my health. Like when I consume my cannabis, I wake up in the morning and things hurt and I don't want to move. And there are still residuals, and part of that is I am older. Like my husband's getting older and his body is breaking down, and he's trying to, he's complaining, and I'm getting better and better every day because I was like an old person for 18 years and now I'm getting better. But when I wake up in the morning, I do have the aches and pains and everything is slow. I consume my cannabis, and it takes a while because I do it through edibles and oils, so it's not an instant high. But as the day goes on and I take it throughout the day in different dosings, it just constantly leaves me at this level of, okay, what are you doing? and how is it benefiting you now or you for future you, no matter what I'm doing. I mean, it's just this amazing thing that I have found, and it works for me.
Okay.
But for those that do get stoned, I started working with people, and people come, and one of the things I really implore people, I'm not a yoga person, like I don't know poses, but I say I do yoga because I move my body in the ways that it feels it needs. I take time and I go deep and I just sit and I listen to my body and I say, okay, what hurts? And then and apparently that is pretty much yoga, because when I look it up, most of what I'm doing is a pose. But I tell people, using cannabis or CBD in some sort of movement or exercise is a really good way to start exploring with it, because it allows you, as again, to identify with your body and connect. And the high part of it, we should be goofy and childish every once in a while. So, I tell people, if there's a little bit, like, you're microdosing, so you're not getting crazy high that your mind is, gone nuts. But it's just, I call it a niggle, but it's just a little bit of, it's like when you take a sip of wine. Most people don't have an aversion to that different, but they have an aversion to the cannabis different. And I think that's partly just because of not being familiar with it.
Yeah, the persona of it, how it's been
it's
illegal
huge.
for so long.
Right. But as I said, I was there, and now, I mean, I grow, I plant, we grow, I process all of it. I make balms and tinctures and CBDs. So what I started to say is people use it as a symptom managing, and I do applaud that, but there is this next level. And for some reason, maybe my body was just so done that it needed to desperately jump onto this. I didn't just take it, I'm using cannabis. As I said, every time I consumed it, I went inside and I said, how can I fix things? And as that progressed, it was like, I need to change my diet. I mentioned my boys are power lifters. I was the one my youngest weighs 350 pounds and deadlifts 835 pounds. So they're massive people. I fed them, I did that, but I can guarantee you it wasn't grass-fed beef or organic anything. And so at this moment in my life, I had just cupboards full of just crap food. And I thought and I was a single mom. You asked, what do I do for work? I haven't made a paycheck since 2015 because I made healing myself my job. This was, if I got any other job, I would no longer be my focus. And yes, I am incredibly blessed that I have a situation where I was able to do that, because I'm not sure what would have become of me had I not done it. But I see so many other people. That's the great thing with opening this retreat and connecting with other people on their healing journeys. It doesn't necessarily require the absolute, involvement of self-care that it took for me, because I don't know that everybody is as far deep into their destruction of their, or so deep into their disease. There weren't many people who went through 4 rounds of disease modifying therapies and, didn't poop and I feel like my body just had a lot more.
Yeah, you've been through a lot. Okay, so besides the cannabis, you said you changed your diet and you do other things. So talk about that.
Yeah, so I started cleaning up my diet. Everybody in my life would have said, oh, she's a healthy eater, but that was complete baloney. It was full of processed and all sorts of inflammatory. I had a doctor tell me that what I eat had absolutely no correlation to my disease or its progression, just like somebody said. Crazy, just these little things that put in your mind permanently. No, that's not going to matter. And I had a candy drawer, and everybody said I was healthy and, oh, mom never eats, but that's because once a month I would go in and I would eat 10 pounds of gummy bears, I would just binge on, and then and so everybody thought I was healthy. So I cleaned that up, but I also had always exercised. And that was the thing that left me at my lowest, was not being able to walk my service dog even around the block. And I pride myself in my body and my physical appearance because I have worked hard for it. And it's not to look good, it's to be strong, because I always wanted to be there for my kids and I wanted to be strong. And so I knew I needed to return to something. Swimming has always been my thing. And when I got an MS, that became even more so because you couldn't fall. And so I went back to the pool, and after 2 days, I came down with the flu. And I mean, I know the moment I got the flu, like it just hit me, and I went into the biggest MS flare I've ever been in. It was absolutely awful. And that was in like 2018. So I had no pharmaceuticals that I was leaning on. I just leaned into, began looking at teas and things. And when I pulled out of that and realized I didn't need pharma for that, and that I felt better at the end of it than I did, that was, I'm all in. And that's where I really dialed in. And I talk about in the chapter I wrote where there was a moment where I was just kind of doing things, like looking for ideas and grabbing onto things, thinking natural. Okay, what's natural? Because like, how does that even look? What does that entail? And there was a moment where I decided it's like refurbishing an old antique car, and which I'm familiar with. And like, then everything made sense. It was like everything I do is in, the process of making this car look good and run and purr again. And so, putting bad things in my, everybody's like, God, you are, because I am religious about eating clean. And, no one around me does. I mean, my husband eats Hostess cupcakes, for God's sake. I mean, not all the time, but he does, because he loves them and he's writing his own story. But I mean, everybody it marvels at my ability to just stay the course. Christmas, every, sweet goes by me, and I know what it felt like. I described not wanting to live. This works for me. Like, I don't care what works for anybody else.
I've got a saying, it's no food tastes as good as healthy feels.
Yes.
Right?
Well, and to be honest, when you get healthy food tastes better than any shitty food you've ever had. I mean, my husband, we now grow, and not only the cannabis and the hemp, but we also grow our vegetables. We're a work in progress because we both came from the city. We don't really know what we're doing, but we're learning and getting better every year. But it's like, if you take a tomato off the vine, it tastes so different than a tomato in the grocery store. Well, we get people here, who are beginning their healing journey, like, oh, I don't want to come because I don't want to get stoned. Like, that's not what you're coming to learn. Like, if you feel cannabis is part of your journey, then 100% we can look at CBD, we can look at THC, we can look at whatever, topical, all of the things. But if your journey is you need to clean up your diet, turns out, having fed those boys and having been on the couch, what I used to do is watch cooking shows. I have become a phenomenal cook, like really good. And so the people who come, they come and they eat really, really healthy food, and they stand behind me and they learn, about why I'm cooking with each of the things that I'm cooking. And they come with us on our little, because every day we drive around the country, because that's part of how I heal. And they see us going to farm stands and buying local things. And that's, again, part of the process that seems simple to me now, but seemed intangible back in 2018. And so again, I started, went back swimming, got the flu flare, and then started walking, and figured that I needed to be outside and I could walk 1 block. And so every single day, rain or shine, I took my service dog and we would walk. And every single day we walked at least one more driveway. And I would come home and sometimes have to sleep for like 5 hours. But that eventually got to 4 miles. And so every day for 3 years, I walked 4 miles every single day. And
that's so
it
good
took
for you.
that commitment. Yeah. Mm-hmm. And now I'm addicted to it. Like, I can't stand not walking. But again, and if I had chosen, I had always worked out in a gym prior to that. If I had chosen to do that for the safety, of the guardrails and all of that, I wouldn't have gotten the benefits of being outside. I didn't know the scientific reasoning behind loving being in the sunshine, but I have always sought the sunshine. I was a lifeguard. I always had outdoor jobs, in high school and college, because I couldn't imagine being inside during the summer. Like, that's crazy talk. The sun is only out because I lived on the East Coast and now the West Coast, where we do have, seasonal sun. And so for me, I have to be outside in it. And I now understand that was my body telling me, like, you're going to be vitamin D deficient if you don't go out there. And I'm always like, doesn't anybody else feel this? And like, my brother can't stand the sun. And he's like, the minute that he lives in Arizona, and so it's hot and it's different, But I was like, I would go crazy because my body is screaming, go out in the sun. But that's one of the parts that I've learned is your body telling you how to heal stuff. I mean, because the sun is such an imperative part of all of it.
Yeah. Megan, you had a cane for a little bit. And so when was it where you felt like, okay, you know, I'm pretty much healed. Like I don't have any symptoms anymore. Like I feel pretty dang good.
A big part of my healing process was tied to my divorce and my ex and the emotional control he had over me. And my youngest turned 18 in 2020. And that was a massive release for me. And then we were hit with a world pandemic, and I was basically quarantined up here, which was wonderful because every day, instead of walking in the city, we had moved up here where I was walking with the cows and the trees and everything. So that was a fantastical thing. I did get COVID. I am not vaccinated. I just had nothing to do with vaccines. I was committed to not putting bad shit in my body, and that sounded like bad shit. That is just all it came down to. And you know, a lot of people have different opinions of it. I did get COVID at probably one of my weakest moments in my life because I was severely anemic. Because although I was up here walking and doing all the right things and eating healthy food, I was not eating beef because at some point I had developed an allergic reaction to beef and it would make me very, very sick. And so I ended up not eating it. I became very, very anemic and ended up having to do iron infusions. So that was 2021, 22, my father died. 2023 to 2024, I began to feel I'm on top of this. Like I sat there and I looked for, you know, the typical dead numb foot that I always had, or the drop foot, or the, when I look at bright sunlight, my vision goes blurry, like all of these things that had just been these little things that I still carried with me, and they were gone. And I went to Costco, which I don't do any like that is just sensory overload for me. And I made it 2 hours. This was with the grandbaby, but I mean, I was okay. And I was like, this is significant. Like this means that it really is receding and I'm finding ease. And then I was hit with menopause, and my menopause was, I know everybody says it can last forever. Mine was fast and fierce, but I had horrible hives. Like my daughter still doesn't talk to me because I posted a picture on Instagram of just, you don't see my boobs, but it was underneath and it's just raw hives. And she was horrified. She's like, Mom. But to be fair, I got 15 DMs from women who had the same thing, who were like, what are you doing? And I was like, hey, I'm using my CBD salve and it's helping. And I sent it to them and it helped them. So I feel justified in bearing that. But then I ended up with blephitis, which is a swelling around your eyes. I had, I need to write it all down, but I had, trigeminal neuralgia. That is an MS symptom. Have you heard about that?
No, I have not.
Okay, that is a nerve that gets pinched from inflammation, and it's called the suicide disease because people who truly have it as a chronic thing often do take their lives because the pain is so severe. And I developed that, and it is a very common MS symptom. And so I don't really go see doctors, but I have a naturopath, and I had somebody else that I was talking to, and I had my dentist, and they were all like, it's the MS. And I was like, no, this is menopause. And they were like, no. And I was like, no, this is going to go away. And it did. I had to live with it for like 9 months, but eventually I got my hormones in balance. I tried HRT and that didn't work for me, but I did try it. And eventually I put on 30 pounds in 3 months. It just hit me. And I just ballooned up and I was miserable again. And it felt so defeating because I had worked so hard to get my body. I was 75 pounds overweight in 2015. And in 2023, I was, my fighting weight of 130. I had rock hard, abs and to a point. I'm still 50 years old. But all of a sudden, it was like somebody just put an air compressor in my mouth and just blew me up. And one day I just looked at my husband. I'm like, I don't fit in any of my clothes. Like, what is going on? And so that has been the last 18 to 20 months. As I said, I'm on my way down. I've lost 20 pounds. I'm back to, I felt it was similar to the MS because it was all consuming, but it was a very different pain. It was not the neurological zings and ferocity of the MS. It was just an aching agony. Like I was just too puffy and didn't, you know, like as I said, my cells didn't fit in my body. And so that, again, I'm beginning to feel, and I leaned very, very heavily on CBD for that, because CBD is for inflammation, THC is for pain. And so for the journey through MS, THC was more my friend. It helped me realign my brain. We talked about I had horrible brain fog in my old interviews. I kind of slur and just sound kind of off and sound like I'm stoned, to be honest. I mean, like what you would expect somebody being stoned.
Let's talk about your book. You got a book, right?
Yes, I do. The me that wrote this was on the pharmaceuticals. The me that wrote this was, I say, kind of blah, 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 and yet I had the mind to write it. And I'm so thankful, because there's no way A, I could have recreated it, or B, like remembered any of it. I mean,
okay, tell us the name of it. You showed it.
Segue. Yeah, sorry. So it's Segue Into My New Life, and it is available on Amazon. I am going to put a new cover on it because I feel like this is kind of dark and ominous. But I'm going to keep the story. But it's basically takes you from the journey of, you know, what my first symptoms were, going to the doctor, getting my spinal tap with all of these funny stories interjected, taking my kids to the infusion center because I couldn't get my husband on the phone, and like having them sit on the floor. I mean, it was all this experience that, again, I couldn't write right now. And it makes it such a strong argument for I did everything. And like I read this book and I cry because it's my story. But everyone who has read it says, oh my God, I'm like sobbing for you at the end. And all I want to know is what happens. And like now I get this second version to tell people, guess what? Like the pharma isn't the way to go.
You've been through a lot. Like I can't believe what you've been through. Anyway, I got to conclude this.
I just want to direct. The other thing is, this is how you found me. So my chapter in this is called Beating Multiple Sclerosis, Empowering Stories. And that I'm chapter 33. And that takes you through the journey, kind of explains a little bit more about the cannabis and my use of it, and where, you know, what I'm doing now with the retreat and whatnot.
Okay. What can you say to somebody who just got diagnosed, or somebody that's struggling, that's on big pharma drugs? Like, what would you say to them?
Yeah. Well, I think it's really strong to we always talk about how you frame things. It's all, you know, how you look at things. Disease sounds like such a horrible, horrible word. If you look at it, you break down that word, it's dis and ease. If your body is not at ease, then it is your check engine light going on in your car, and you can choose to ignore it, or you can decide that this is your opportunity and hope that you're going to get a new car down the road somewhere, or it's your opportunity to just dial in and begin to take care of yourself. I didn't know or believe in our ability to heal. I honestly did not. So going into this, I had no expectations other than perhaps this will be slightly better than my life on pharmaceuticals, because as I have mentioned, it was not going well. The fact that it has ended up here, and I stand outside in the evening getting my setting sun stuff, because quantum healing is a thing. People should look into it. It's kind of crazy, and grounding, because that's important. I practice gratitude. I am so freaking grateful for getting this disease, because it made me find myself and be true to myself. And, you know, I people hear that are newly diagnosed, and it's just mind-boggling to them, I'm sure. But reach out to me. I mean, I will happily help anybody in any regard. And I've mentioned to Adrienne, I'm not necessarily opposed to pharmaceuticals. If you're on them and thinking, you know, that you can't live without them, I'm not going to talk to you because you're on them. You know, I mean, a lot of people are fearful because they haven't made the jump, or that they're still relying on it, that I have, you know, something to say. But all I want to do is help people find their healthiest self.
Well, you've been on quite a journey, Megan, and thank you for sharing it, really. I think there's a lot of people that are going to get a lot out of this. So thank you.
I hope so. I know I'm kind of crazy. My husband says that. I was that way before the cannabis. I tried very hard to not do things that people will think, oh, she's the crazy stoner big lady, because I understand this is just truly medicine. And just like I wouldn't have given you my medicine if you came to my house when I was on pharmaceuticals, I'm not necessarily going to push the cannabis on anybody, but it's what works for me.
Yeah.
So,
Thanks again, Megan.
Thank you, Adrienne. I appreciate the opportunity.